Meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 12th meeting. Commissioners, are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. This evening, we have a public hearing. This public hearing is Type 2 Home Occupation Permit 2019-25, operation of a veteran service facility. Mr. Hinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners. I will present a summary of the request tonight, and as you pointed out, this is a public hearing, and so you can open it up at that time.
Can't hear you.
Well, I'll put the microphone on. Is that better?
Maybe.
Okay. All right. Let's rearrange some wires up here, so I'm trying to get situated. That'll work. There we go. So tonight what we're looking at is a Type 2 home occupation permit for the former Couturier Smith Funeral Home located at 201 East 7th Street. The property is currently owned by Katara Investments, who are the owners of the present funeral home on 3075 Vermillion Street. There is an agreement by the Markisons, Dean, not Dwayne, Shirley Markison, to purchase the property and to live in it and to operate a home occupation. So the home occupation permit is what we're here to consider tonight. When you take a look at the existing building, it's been around since 1959, been in use as a funeral home, I think, during most of that time period. The funeral home operations were there up until a short period ago when the funeral home was consolidated and moved down onto Vermillion Street with the new funeral parlor. With the property itself, it is zoned R2, which is a residential zoning district. It's R2 medium density residence. Within that zoning district, it's primarily a residential district itself for 1 and 2 family structures. Home occupation permits are allowed as a permitted use within that district, subject to certain conditions, and I'll go through those in just a moment here. So when we take a look at the neighborhood itself, as the map shows here, it's primarily residential. You can see the funeral home, 201 7th Street here. Residential homes surround the property to the north. To the east is the old Rosewood bed and breakfast. And then residential properties to the south, Sibley Street to the west, and then St. Luke's Church and other residential properties in that location. So when we're looking at a home occupation permit, we're looking at our home occupation regulations. There are 2 types of home occupations that we have within our code. They're termed a Type 1 home occupation, which is something that can be done by right. This is something that does not have much of an impact on the neighborhood itself and can be done without any real sense that the occupation is going on within the neighborhood. Then there is what we term a Type 2 home occupation license. A Type 2 permit has a greater impact and thus requires a public hearing, review by the Planning Commission, setting of conditions of operations, and ultimately approval by the City Council. What triggers a home occupation permit on a Type 2 basis would be having outside employees working in the home, utilizing a garage, and having more than 1 customer visit at a time. These are the type of impacts that would make a home occupation license a Type 2 license. So when we're looking at home occupation permits, what we're looking at here are things that can operate within the home but not have a significant impact to the neighborhood themselves. The home occupation ordinances stipulate certain things that must be adhered to, including that there's not any exterior alterations to the building, there's no display and storage of equipment or materials outside related to the business, there's not offensive noise or vibration or odor, it shall be conducted indoors, not generate any sewage or natural gas in greater quantities, and not really jeopardize the health and safety of the city. There is a limitation on shipment and delivery of products and merchandise. They can't be done between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. It can't cause additional traffic that would not normally be expected in the neighborhood, and it should be in operation. It cannot be in operation, excuse me, from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it has to close. It cannot operate the home occupation past 8 p.m. Articles or services made or originating on the premises are allowed. One vehicle or trailer associated with the occupation, and then a limitation on signage as well, which would be one single-phase sign of 2 square feet. So all of these regulations are put upon any home occupation. And then within the type 2 occupation, we have the ability to review that and to assess whether the application would meet the requirements and to place additional requirements on the permit for this. So what are we looking at here with this proposal? We'll get into some detail here in a moment. So this is the property, as you know, front side here from 7th Street. This shows the rear of the property. It's a large walkout rambler, as you can see from the garage doors, a few parking spaces in the back here. So what the Markinsons propose to do is to operate a Foss & Swanson's Veterans Organization. What it would be is it would be a museum, library, and community center. So if you take a look at the floor plan of the building itself, and this may be difficult to read, this is looking at it from 7th Street. So this is to the right of the building. Sibley Street would be over here to the left. On the right side of the building, this is primarily the residential unit. This is where the Markinsons would live in the home. And then to the west side, to the left side of the entry is the funeral home space. If you've been to a funeral home there, that's where the services occurred. This would be more the community center space. It would operate sort of like a hall, a rental hall, like a VFW hall, in which they would rent this out for certain events. And that would take place within this area on the first floor. When you take a look at the walkout basement section, section of the, maybe, and go back. There we go, downstairs area, you've got the garage in the back here, and then you've got the museum space, which was formerly an area for sales of funeral-related items. And then you've got some other commercial rental space down on the bottom, and then part of the residential unit and the basement in this area. So that's kind of how the building would be segmented out.
Correction on that, that is for the commercial, the museum and the restrooms.
Okay, so the restrooms would be for the commercial, okay. So we've got that there. So that is a layout of the property itself. As far as some of the uses there, the people involved in the home occupation would be the Markinsons. They would be required to live there in order for this operation to go on. This is part of the reason for a home occupation permit. There would be people involved in the home occupation as well, community service volunteers, people coming in for management and maintenance. One of the things that we'd like to be able to do is to get a better idea of how many people would be involved in that. That's something that I neglected to do as part of this report. The main floor would house the residence, the community center, as I said. There would be an entrance through the garage to the museum in the bottom of it. We did have some discussions with the fire marshal on the property last week, and Dina has the understanding of what he would need to do to create an acceptable entrance down there. There'd be some spaces on the property for parking, 4 of them right now, and there'd be some minor interior alterations within the building itself. And within the community center space, the applicants would be proposing that outside caterers would come in to cater certain events, and that some of those events may have the service of alcohol. And that would be the proposal that they would be bringing forward. Housing of the homeless in this property would not occur. However, they have shared that service of food to the homeless and use of bathroom for homeless persons to shower may occur within the property. So that is And this is taken from the application that was submitted in subsequent conversations that we've had up to this evening. So when we take a look at the property itself, there's some observations that we have. This is certainly an unusual situation here from a couple of different standpoints. Number one, you had a funeral home that operated here for 60 years in a 7,300 square foot large walkout rambler in the middle of a residential area. This funeral home predated any zoning that we had within it. It's what we term a non-conforming use, which meant it operated before the regulations came in. It could continue to operate as is. If the funeral home had come in a few years ago, it would not have been something that we could have considered. Now, we did have some changes to funeral homes a couple of years ago to make them legal, but up until that time, we didn't have that. So we had an unusual situation here. When we're taking a look at the home occupation permit, we're taking a look at things that would not cause undue changes to a neighborhood. This neighborhood's a little bit different from the standpoint that we've had a funeral home in operation there for 60 years. What we looked at when reviewing the home occupation permit from a staff perspective is to ensure that the operation of any home occupation here would not be more intensive than the uses that would have been found within the funeral home itself. When you take a look at this type of operation in another neighborhood, perhaps this would be too intensive. But given the operations that has occurred with the the funeral home for so many years here, we looked at it from that perspective. When we looked at the funeral home, we asked the operators of the funeral home what they expected from a traffic standpoint and number of visitors per service. What they told us was that the number of attendees at visitations was around maybe 200, with 125 to 150 attendees for funerals, and that there were approximately 140 events per year. So basically, 1 out of every 3 days, 125 to 200 people there during that time. Business and traffic generated from the proposed home occupation that's being proposed by the Markinsons appears to be less than that. We are putting a limitation within the license that the people within the hall area would be limited to 150 people, and the frequency of the events is likely to be less than 140 events per year, which the funeral home operated. The site does not meet current parking requirements. The site predated any parking requirements that we had established. Those parking requirements are grandfathered in. When we take a look at the parking generation from a funeral home and what we term an assembly space, which the hall would be the use of, the parking regulations are the same on that one. So there's not, we are not anticipating an increase in the demand in that area, and so the parking requirements not being met would be grandfathered in on this property. The applicants have indicated that they would not provide overnight accommodations for the homeless, although there may be meals, showers served. What we want to, from a staff standpoint, we do not believe that the services to the homeless is part of a home occupation. We believe that's beyond the scope of what could be considered for a home occupation permit. And we're limiting the license to the uses that have been proposed for the community center, the museum, and the library, and that would not include services to the homeless as part of this home occupation. The operation of the community center would need to abide by the 8 p.m. limit on this. When you have a hall rental and perhaps a nighttime event, that could certainly cause problems for the ability to rent a hall out during the evening hours. However, it is clear within the home occupation regulations that there is an 8 p.m. limit, and we want to, we've discussed this with the applicants. We hope that there's a good understanding of that. They've had some discussions about a desire to have later times, but we need to be clear that the 8 p.m. limit within the code would need to be followed as part of this permit. The applicants have indicated that they may have a veterans memorial on the site possibly sometime in the future. That would need to be something outside of the scope of the home occupation because of the limitations on use of outdoor areas. The applicants do not plan on serving alcohol themselves. However, as I mentioned, there may be caterers that come in, and the caterers may choose to serve alcohol for events. From talking to the operation of the funeral home, it appeared that they may have done that in the past as well. Alcohol service by outside caterers may be common in other rental hall operations, but when you take a look at a residential neighborhood, there's a question of whether it would be suitable for this residential neighborhood. So, under the recommendations, this is something I think for Planning Commission consideration. Right now, there's not any limitations within the recommendations on the service of alcohol. If this is something that the Planning Commission sees fit to put a restriction on, that should be something that would be added to the recommendations. As far as notification, we did send out notification to within 350 feet of the property, and I did receive a couple of phone calls on that, a couple of emails. I think there were more a couple were in the nature of asking questions about it. One of them was asking, whether a community center was something that was needed within this area because there were others within the city. So that's what we've received for questions so far. With the home occupation permit, the way that it runs is there is a 1-year provisional license that's granted. So there's basically a 1-year trial period. Do that, and then a full license is issued after that 1-year period if everything is going as planned and as the license. And then those are issued on a 5-year basis from there. So when we take a look at the conditions of approval, I think I've gone through most of these. What I'm stating is this needs to be operated in conjunction with the report, in conjunction with the application and questionnaire that has been submitted by the Markisons, unless further stipulated here. Any modifications need to be approved by the city. They need to maintain a permanent residence in the structure and remain chiefly involved in the operation. The use of the upstairs is limited to no more than 150 people. No providing of services to the homeless. Number of employees engaged in the home occupation, there should be an idea of what that would be limited to. I did put a blank in there and hope to get more information on that. It needs to be in compliance with our nuisance and property maintenance codes. Things sold on site need to be incidental, adhere to our building and fire regulations, and its probationary status for 1 year. So that is my comments related to the home occupation permit. Again, this is a public hearing if you want to open it up at this time. Thank you.
I'd like to
Thank you, John. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. If you'd like to say anything, can you please come up to the podium and give your name and address?
I'm Dean Markison, the CEO of Foss and Swanson Veterans. My wife is the secretary, my daughter is the treasurer, and my other daughter is a board member along with my grandson. The limitations on their appointment is that every 2 years they will be elected or re-elected, and they cannot serve past 8 years. Therefore, after 8 years, they're off the board. First, I think, number one, I'll make the statement. I will comply with all the conditions that were set forth for a home occupation permit. As I said, I will comply. I think a little more information is needed on what is my mission. My mission is to be engaged and committed to a sustainable awareness commitment within the community of Hastings and the surrounding area to our service members, veterans, families, grandparents, in-laws, children, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, and even the enemies, widows, and unsung heroes. That includes the Blue Star and the Gold Star families. What is our purpose? We're going to be visible, delivery, connecting, referrals, and calls to action, opportunities for community service, volunteerism, demonstrating how to serve, support, meet, recognize, and form relationships. What are our goals? Honor, integrity, respect, excellence within the community, have fun, support, serve, and honor, make connections and opportunities through referrals to all levels of the nation. And that's our duty and obligation to all living and deceased individuals. Primarily, we're in the referral business. We don't handle the case. The referrals go to the Dakota County Veteran Service Officers, Hastings Family Services, anyone that can help these selected groups. We're here to help them become a productive citizen if they're down on their luck. I would like to share a story that we're currently involved in. We are helping one veteran retiree in Hastings who has Agent Orange and is dying of cancer. The city basically said their yard was not fit to live in. Therefore, I took it upon myself, and a bunch of volunteers like Paul came over and we're cleaning up the yard. It cost me $2,000 in cash to do it, and the economic impact is up to about over $18,000 to help this one resident. In conjunction with that, we decided, being the next door neighbor was drawing down the values of the homes in the neighborhood, that we would clean his yard up too. He's not a veteran. His yearly salary is $18,000 a year. I'd ask you, can you make it on $18,000 a year? We're going to get them up, so that will be a showcase within the community of Hastings, what community service volunteers are all about, and he'll also have a showcase home when we complete the mission. So our services are, the Hastings community is very excited and energetic to complete the mission, purpose, and goals in order to be effective and efficient. The community is also gratitude. We have such brave service members, veterans, families, children, and residents right in our community. The local military continues to make great contributions to the nation, state, country, and city. Souls are touched, and the community is proud to recognize and say thank you. I'd like to say one thing about the 434th Chemical Company, the local National Guard. They just recently recognized a member of their unit that was previously a POW MIA. I think that's very commendable of the military unit. And we also, this past August 28th, and at the latest cruise-in, we recognized 2 Vietnam veterans that were killed in action, 2 veterans that were killed in the war of terrorism, and 1 that didn't win the fight with cancer. All their families were present, and they're aware of what I'm doing and are very pleased that we are recognizing their accomplishments and their service to our nation. I would ask all the residents of Hastings to join us, as it is a community-wide effort with no membership dues. The community is committed to optimizing communications and information to establish an active, cohesive, sustainable network. Remember to keep all in your thoughts and prayers. Step up, be a community service volunteer whenever you can, and say thank you. They all serve their nation admirably. In reference to some of the comments that I've heard already about unrowdy people being in the area, well, I know how to dial 911. And I've done it in numerous cases already. And I work with all the sheriff's departments within the surrounding area. In fact, about a week ago, I had to work with Winona and the Goodhue sheriff, who sent me to the community police department, and ultimately I ended up with the Dakota County sheriff, who referred me to the Hastings Police Department. And we were able to aid that individual because he had high blood pressure and low sugar. He was taken to the Alina Hospital by the ambulance. However, I cannot know any personal information on that individual because it would violate the Privacy Act. So anybody that comes to me, I can't share anything. I have to protect them. The question possibly came up, how do we collaborate with some of the service organizations within Community Hastings? I'm very proud of the United Heroes League because of what they do and the project they just took on with Chicago to provide grandma's housings for the kids who come to Hastings for camps that may last 1 to 2 weeks. So Shane is doing, and his crew is doing an outstanding job. Then there's Helen Lucken, who is with the Quilts of Valor. I can call upon her to recognize any military veteran that has performed in the line of duty, and she will give them a Quilt of Valor, which is to wrap them in warmth and give them healing. We also work, I am a member of the VFW, the American Legion, AMVETS, Vietnam Veterans America, and Disabled American Veterans. So therefore, I'm committed to my comrades in all things. One of the things that I say, we'll bring them all the way home, not part way. We'll walk all of God's ways and keep all of God's commandments. Are there any questions for me?
Why are you bringing alcohol into the neighborhood?
Well, primary, we're not doing alcohol in the neighborhood. It's no difference than,
Said you're bringing alcohol.
Sir,
I'll let John answer that.
We need to keep order here. There will be an opportunity to speak, and we ask that all speakers come up to the podium when they have an opportunity. You will have an opportunity. Thank you.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markinson. Come on up to the podium. State your name, please.
My name is Amy Martin. I live at 220 7th Street East, right across from the bed and breakfast. My husband Dudley Parkinson owns the duplex directly across from the funeral home. And with all due respect to everyone who served and their families and gratitude to them, I would like to state my unequivocal opposition to this use. We have three neighbors who could not be here tonight, who are also opposed. I hope that they wrote to the city council members. One neighbor cannot be here tonight because he's getting his house ready to show he's moving. The neighbor next door to me is also moving. Two neighbors on our block of 7 property owners have left in the last year and a half because our part of town is becoming scary to us. I said this at the homeless shelter use meeting 2 weeks ago. We have done our share, I think, in this part of town, taking in at-risk populations. We have the women's shelter, we have the runaway teen shelter, we have at least one group home for disabled adults, we have a day workshop for disabled adults, we have the low-income housing, or condos, townhouses, low-income apartments, and Al-Anon meetings. We really have done our share in this tiny historic part of town. And this use sounds like population with some of the very same problems that the homeless shelter residents would be coming in with. described by the woman who was going to run the homeless shelter as homelessness, mental health issues, chemical dependency problems, and involvement with the criminal justice system. We have the grade school, the Catholic grade school on 7th and Ramsey. I am terrified to think of what's going to happen when that is gone, because that has been our only protection. Qatar Investments is actually the Reagan family, Premier Bank, who also now holds the mortgage on the bed and breakfast that they have not put on the market for 2 years. They have had it sitting empty. I have had to call the city along with other neighbors to ask the city to go to them and say, please pick up the bags of garbage in the backyard, cut the grass, get the dead tree branches, pick up the fence that fell over. That's our local Premier Bank. I have asked the newspaper and the TV station to find out what the plan is for that beautiful historic bed and breakfast. We only have one left. The other one burned down. And as you guys know, the city just did a study like 2 years ago with Explore Minnesota and the U of M and the Chamber to determine what is the best way to get people to Hastings. And what they found out was historic tourism. Like, we have that. We have the river, we have the train, we have historic tourism, we've got a gorgeous town. This is the fact that the only National Registry historic bed and breakfast has sat empty for 2 years when it could be in use. It was running successfully for, 30 years? So I would like to know what the Reagan family and the Premier Bank plan to do with that bed and breakfast. Are they waiting for it to run down? They came to the city, as you probably know, with a request to turn it into a chemical dependency treatment center. So our neighborhood is feeling incredibly at risk. I feel like we have done a good job of being anchors and caring about our neighborhood. What was I going to say? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the difference, okay. The difference between a funeral home crowd that drives in their cars, even 3 times a week. The Couturier Funeral Home was a good neighbor. They kept the place looking nice. They had funerals. Funerals are quiet. People come, they stand outside, they go in, they pay their respects, they get in their cars, they drive back to their homes and their jobs and their families. That is a big difference between the people that are at a community center because they don't have a job, they don't have a place to live, they might have a mental health issue, they might have other issues. We are asking, please, this is a residential neighborhood. It is a problem, a business problem that should be addressed responsibly by Jesse Starkson and Premier Bank to, if you buy the 2 funeral homes in town and then shut them down and build a new one, that's fine. But you as a business have a responsibility to responsibly then take care of that property. You either turn it into a duplex, take the building off and sell it as a lot. That's a business cost that should have been factored in by Jesse Starkson. It is not something that should lower our property values and make us feel unsafe. And I admire your desire to help. This is not the right place for the use that you are proposing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make some statements.
Dean, could we ask that everyone has the opportunity to speak, and then we'll go second round? Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Wes Lund. I live with my wife at 120 East 7th Street. I'm kitty corner from this lovely building. And I have a few questions, John, I hope you can answer. I'm pretty sure you will. This permit that we're talking about, will this be very similar to the Christmas store that we had on the corner of 7th and Vermillion?
Somewhat similar in that it was a little different type of permit, but similar, yes.
Because we had a resident living there conducting business. And
Right,
there were rules and stipulations, and you folks were paying attention, I think, to what was going on and how things progressed.
correct.
And so that would be kind of an ongoing thing here. Parking, there's a sign that faces my house that says funeral parking and St. Luke's parking. Do you know if there's a similar kind of understanding that if this were to go into place, St. Luke's would welcome parking for events at this building?
And that might be something that Mr. Marcuson can address there, but
Okay.
my understanding from talking to the owners of the property is that there was some sort of gentleman's agreement between St. Luke's and the funeral home for shared, to allow funeral patrons to park. I'm not sure whether that would be done similar to the home occupation permit.
Because I can remember the first time I came home, after looking at the house there, I'd never been awake. And I pulled in one Tuesday, came around the corner, and all these cars are parked around the block, and I said, who in the world's having a party? And I said, well, then it was like, duh, there's a funeral home next door, they're having a wake. But over the 19 years that we've been there, have not found the parking to be terribly inconvenient. Occasionally, well, depending upon whose funeral it is, I might have to park a little further or in the driveway, a couple back up. But typically, the parking has not been terribly bad. So if that were to be available in St. Luke's, I suspect that with 150 people, this isn't going to be too terribly imposing on the neighborhood. So the couple other questions, if there is going to be an outside memorial, I'm assuming from what you said that would require additional process with the city to be able to put something up?
The way that the home occupation ordinance reads is that you can't have any outdoor activity related to the home occupation. What Dean has explained to me is that he may put up a memorial there, and I've told him that if it's for his personal use expression, that's one thing, but if it's part of programming or activities going on as part of the home occupation, that would be something that would not be allowed by the home occupation permit. So it's kind of a fine line there.
Yeah, well, in very parochial interest, but I don't want any more shining lights in my windows.
Sure.
That if something were to go up, that would be a concern to my wife and I. I'm also, I have to say, my wife and I, in our brief discussion of this, we would be supportive of no alcohol being used at that facility. And I think that might accomplish a couple of purposes. One is that it would be supportive of an 8 o'clock curfew. I think if people can't drink and they're not going to be, there's not as great an incentive to hang around. And it probably would also hold down the number of events that might happen there if there's not going to be alcohol. So just so you know, we would be supportive of that being a part of the permit, that there be no alcohol. The other thing that I am a little bit concerned about is precedent. Obviously, the Marcusons aren't going to be there forever. Couturier hasn't been there forever. Which, by the way, though, I was interesting. I was talking with Bob Couturier about this property because we've been interested. The family lived in there when it was first built. This was, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. This did have a residence to it, and they lived in there for a long period of time before they vacated and turned it into the business entirely. So I think the building is constructed in such a way for there to be some residential occupation there, and that sounds perfectly fine to me. But the question I have is precedent. What happens after the Marcusons are done with the property? Does this permit and these actions set precedent for the next owners? And I think that might be part of what Amy's a little concerned about too, is that what happens next?
Sure, and I can address that. With the home occupation permit, it runs with the owner-operator of the property. So if Dean was to move out of the property, the new owner would not automatically be granted that permit. They would need to secure their own permit, even if the operation was similar in fashion to that one. So it would carry only with him.
And with this purchase, Dean and his wife will be the title holders of the property?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Anybody else would like to come up to the podium? Certainly.
Well, I'm Russ Willits. I own the house directly across the street from the funeral home. And I concur completely with everything that Amy has said earlier. And one of the things that I'm concerned with is bringing the homeless into that facility. Now, I understand that they're not supposed to be given a home there, but I would see that as a slippery slope in a way that, I mean, what happens in the middle of winter if you have a homeless or several homeless veterans come to your facility? At 5 o'clock, are you going to usher them out the door to die in the snow or whatever? I mean, I'm very concerned about that. I mean, in my home there's a family. Half a block away is an elementary school. I'm just concerned with how bringing the homeless into that facility is going to affect everyone there, including the neighbors. I mean, that's pretty much what my concerns are. And like I say, I am opposed to this for those reasons and for all the reasons that Amy brought up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Willetts. Is there anybody else who'd like to come up and speak?
I'm John Fry, a little bit of a hothead, and I apologize. This letter we get says this is for injured military members. Next thing you know, you're bringing in homeless people. This is a family neighborhood. Any of you people want this kind of people in your neighborhood? He's got 6 houses in his neighborhood that are for sale. Why don't he put them in there so he can be right next door to them? There's kids down the street. There's no vandalism in our block. There's no theft. He brings these people in. Basketballs get stolen, bicycles get stolen, cars get broke into. He's going to be liable. Not us, not our insurance policies, but him, because he brought them in. Now, he stands up here. I'm going to be open until 10 o'clock at night. Funeral home was very seldom open that late. And they are all quiet and respectful. Now he's going to bring alcohol in. So we're going to have 140 drunks in the neighborhood. Now they're going to go down to the school. Puddle their drugs down at the school to the little kids. The housing market for these people, what they own, they're going to lose $50,000, $60,000 a year. There's no value in it. You got a veterans home up there. Why aren't they putting it to full use? Where the Ace Hardware store is, there's a mall. All kinds of vacancies there. Why don't you put the veterans in there? They don't want to be hidden shelters. They want to be out in the public and meet the public and inform the public of what they did and what they're doing. They want to embrace the public. You got downtown Second Street with vacant buildings. Why aren't you putting them in there? Put the museum down there. He wants to put the museum in the basement? How proud are you that I'm going to stick you down in the basement? Who's going to walk down there and look at it? This is a bad idea. Sorry for being so hot-headed.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Fry. Anyone else want to come up? Come on up to the podium, please. State your name and address.
Hi, my name is Mark Dombrowski. I live at 121 East 6th Street, or the corner of 6th and Sibley. So I'm probably scattered. I was actually thinking this was tomorrow night, so I was writing notes all over the place as I was talking, or as you guys were all talking. The first question I got is you mentioned that they were saying that there was 140 events at the funeral home. I don't know what the number is. Angel corrected me, because I'll be honest with you, if there were more than 3 a month, I was shocked. I mean, I'm thinking the number's more like 30 or 40 a year, not 140, but Jesse or whoever could probably have a bigger number on that, but I'm generally at home all the time at night. So I'm concerned. I don't know this man. I love his mission. I love what he's doing. It makes me feel bad that I'm not as what he's doing. But, okay, as I wrote John an email earlier today, I wasn't opposed. I didn't have enough information to know if I was for it or against it. The wording that I didn't like was community center, because we got a lot of properties around here, a lot of community centers, a lot of events areas, VFW, American Legion. I mean, I don't think that Hastings has a shortage for an event center. And if that's part of the plan, I don't like it. I don't, the alcohol thing, I mean, that'd be like turning my house into a motorcycle clubhouse and serving free alcohol to all my buddies because I can do it, right? I don't think any of my neighbors would like that. And I gotta be honest with you, sir, I ain't gonna like that. I love the property. It's a beautiful property. I know the owner's is really hard. It's a difficult property to sell. I think that at some point in time, the community's gonna have to bend a little bit as to what's gonna go in there, because it's gonna be difficult to turn that into a private residence solely alone. But community center, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with the 140 people serving alcohol, or 140 events that can hold 150 people in the course of a year parking on my street. I will be one of those people that Amy was talking about that will be moving. And by the way, when it comes to alcohol, I could be wrong, because I know when I have my funeral, I would like to have alcohol served, but I do not believe that they served alcohol at that funeral home. So that's a no-go. A question. The sign that you were talking about, the two square foot sign, wall sign, does that mean that the current sign with the lights that you were talking about, does that mean that would have to go away? Because I know that was grandfathered in as a funeral home. I'm assuming since it's no longer a funeral home, that signage would go away and it wouldn't be able to be used as a museum marker or signage for the property?
That's my understanding on that. It's a bit of a gray area, but what I know for certain is there was a sign up there for a long time. The sign has not been there for a period of time, although the posts are there. And then there's home occupation regulations, which are 2 square feet. I don't think it could be used again, but.
I mean, I like the sign. It's just that until he brought up the lights in his yard, yeah, I'd probably be with him too. any idea or discussion about volunteers? I noticed that, like, is that a 8 to 6 every day? How many volunteers are working there, helping? Helping. How many people are there besides the Marcusons on a daily basis?
And I think that's something hopefully Mr. Marcuson will address here in his comments upcoming.
Okay. Something that you said earlier about the ordinance about not causing, I didn't quite catch the word, but undue changes to the neighborhood, is that right? Big difference between a funeral event that's going on a couple hours or a few hours a day, 3 or 4 times a month, versus a full-blown mission operation that is probably 6 to 7 days a week. Just the nature of that makes me think that you do have to consider that that would be an undue change to the neighborhood that we all live in. Oh, yeah, and listening about the idea of the event center and a place to go. And again, I'm certainly not here promoting, I don't have any skin in the game on any other properties, but as I was doing some research on this, I noticed there was quite a bit of real estate, commercial real estate, a bit for sale in Hastings, and I noticed that the Coliseum was for sale, which is kind of already like perfectly set up to be an event center. So if my mission is to create a place that, it sounds to me that the majority use would be designing it as an event center, that we probably have the wrong building, that there's probably better buildings in the area if that is our goal. Last question I have, because I've got a dry throat. Actually 2 questions. You were saying it, somebody was saying it here earlier about the slippery slope about homelessness. This really wasn't about homelessness. I don't really quite understand how that snuck into the conversation, but he's trying to help people. And I know that some veterans are down and out, and some are homeless and stuff like that. But my question I really have is the slippery slope part about, I've never met him. He seems to be very committed. I mean, as passionate as anybody I've met that's passionate about something else, he is passionate about this. He's not going to turn somebody away. I wouldn't turn anybody away at 5 o'clock on a January night. And I think because it's a primary residence, where's the line between a person being a beneficiary of the services they offer and being a guest in their private residence? And that's where I think the slippery slope could evolve to. At least that's where my head went as I was hearing that say that, because yeah, I mean, I don't have a mission statement, but I'll tell you what, if somebody knocked on my door, I saw somebody need a place, they'd stay in my house, and I don't care what my neighbors would say. Last question. Foss and Swanson Veterans and CEO, Chief Executive Officer. What kind of organization is it legally? Is it a corporation, an LLC, what type of entity, legal entity is it? Because I did some searching and I couldn't find anything on the Secretary of State website. And so my question was, I guess I was trying to figure out what kind of organization it was. I don't know a lot about it. I deal with businesses all the time, and I'm pretty familiar with LLCs and corporations and stuff like that, but I don't know if it is a nonprofit and that's something along the lines. But then I was also wondering kind of what his protection was, because if I were to create a company called Foss and Swanson Veterans LLC, he'd be kind of, I mean, that should be protection that he should have for himself. But I was just curious what that was. I don't really know one way or the other what it means to me until I hear an answer. But That's kind of all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anybody else? Certainly.
Hi, my name is Angel Wyland. I live at 201 6th Street East. One of my bigger questions and concerns is with this event center and the certain amount of hours that they can operate, again, could this become kind of a homeless kitchen? Could this, be a place where they gather, they're within their hours, whatnot? But again, the slippery slope of, do we turn them away at 8 o'clock on a winter night? Now, are these folks going to come sleep in my porch or in my garage? So that's one concern I have. I am a single mom. I have 3 children, 2 of which, well, one is in college, one just graduated, the other is in high school. My one in college will be home for the summer. I don't necessarily want more strain on our neighborhood as we've had over the years with, the harbor shelter. There's kids missing all the time. There's, kids causing chaos. And I feel bad for these kids. So we do, appreciate what the community does for them, but it is somewhat of a strain and a concern to bring more of that into our neighborhood. I'm a firm supporter of veterans. My dad is a Vietnam vet. My son is going military once he graduates high school. So I have nothing against your mission. I think your mission is phenomenal. I just don't know that it's the right place. I think in a residential area where we are already overloaded, as Amy said, I really don't see how that can bring a benefit to our community, to our little historic area that we're all trying to preserve and keep nice. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Markinson. Ms. Wallen, anybody else?
I don't understand. He wants to be open from 9 in the morning till 10 at night. What are you gonna do from 6 to 10 at night? This is a family neighborhood. People gotta get up and go to work in the morning. They got things to do. Now you're gonna have this disturbance from 6 in the evening till 10 in the evening? The parking there is ridiculous. When the funeral home had their visitations, both sides of the street were parked. You'd have to sit at that end of the block and wait for a car to go through so you could go through. Same with that little church up around the corner on 8th Street. It's ridiculous. The parking has to be on one side of the street and not on the other so people can go about their lives and take care of their business. And now you're gonna bring homeless people in. So what does the homeless people do? They got dogs, cats, drugs, everything else. You want them to come into our neighborhood. He don't want them in his neighborhood. He don't want them in your neighborhood. This is asinine. Sorry again.
Any other comments?
I guess I'd like to make one more quick comment. When the bank and I think her name was Pam Schmidt, were trying to turn the bed and breakfast into a drug rehab facility, the principal of the Catholic grade school wrote a letter to all of the city council members. It was on their Facebook page for a while too, the grade school's Facebook page, stating that their concern was safety for the kids, but also just that the chaos, the 911 calls, the sirens, ambulances, police cars, they were dealing with the disruption and stress of that for the grade school kids we're talking about, just from the girls' shelter, which is on 6th and Tyler, I think. And they said, adding one more facility in which those kind of calls and that kind of activity is going to be part of it was something that they really just wanted the city to step up and protect the school from. And I was concerned, Mr. Markison, when you talked about being comfortable calling 911. I mean, obviously, any of us, if we needed to call 911, would do so, but that, again, just underscores that this is not a proper use in this residential neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Jean Lund, and we live kitty corner from the Couturier Schmidt, and we have, we're zoned historic, and we have gone before the Historic Commission a couple of times in home improvements because we cherish our older home, and we've felt a real sense of responsibility to the community, to the bed and breakfast, to the funeral home, to the church, and to the neighbors to keep our property up. It hasn't always been easy, and it's usually taken longer and cost more. And I just want you to consider how much more, again, pressure of a needy group we can absorb into this community, this small community of residents. Please keep in mind what we've done to keep that neighborhood up and keep historic Hastings historic. We've paid the price to do that. The comment about it would be a difficult property to sell. I would like to forward two possibilities. I don't have the means of doing this, but I think I'm going to start making some phone calls. What about a hospice house? It would be a perfect way for an ambulance to transfer somebody. There's a driveway that goes right up there, double doors with no lip, that could go to a hospital bed. That would be one possibility. An adult daycare, maybe a memory care facility. Again, something that wouldn't require a lot of parking, a lot of traffic of people coming through, but would still be a good use of that building. So you might know of organizations that might forward that idea too. I would just like to suggest that. And to Mr. Markison, my only question to you, and again, I thank you for your commitment to the veterans. I do wonder how your organization differs from Beyond the Yellow Ribbon. Is this a duplication of some of their services? So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we will close the public hearing and, pardon?
Second round.
Did you want to go up again?
Yes. Number one, I heard about the homeless. There will be no homeless actions in that facility. If I am assistance to them, I will meet them at the Legion or at a restaurant and take care of them. The one thing I think you need to know is that the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs has the homeless program, and their commitment is to place all veterans in a home. And they're pretty successful about that now. All they have to do is register with them. All they have to do is contact the Dakota County Veteran Service Officer, and they can get enrolled. So the problem will be taken care of, not by me. Go ahead, ma'am.
So, why did you say that you're providing food and shelter?
Okay, I'll cover that in a minute. My idea about help, maybe meals and showers was because what the western suburbs are doing here. The churches out west open their doors for the homeless. They feed them, they get a bath, and in the morning they're kicked out, just like Dorothy Day Center. It is my desire that the churches of Hastings take on that commitment, just like the western suburbs have. So that there will be no feeding or bathing in that facility. Go ahead.
No.
Nonprofit?
I will right now.
Okay, and are you insured? You would be liable.
Number one, I am a nonprofit, have been approved by the IRS as a 501c organization. I'm in the process of applying with the Secretary of State by submission of my bylaws and assumption of name. That action is ongoing right now. So therefore, I will be registered with the Secretary of State as a bona fide organization in the state of Minnesota, and I'm already recognized by the IRS as a nonprofit. If anybody desires my letter, I have one up here, or if we can't get one produced, I will give it to you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Is your nonprofit insured for any damage caused by any of the patrons of your museum or community center?
My insurance agent is Steve Johnson from State Farm. It will be insured with liability insurance.
Okay, but just pause for a second here. We want to make sure that the conversation is from the podium to the commission here. And so we would, I think Mr. Marcuson was patient enough to hear the comment from the audience here. We'd like to give him the opportunity to address those comments, and if there's further comments or further questions, we'd ask them to do that in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
As far as the events and activities, the majority of my activities and events are not held at that location, because really, community center is a misnomer. We're a gathering place, not a community center, where the residents of the community can come together and talk and listen and maybe have a cup of coffee. I cannot do any food there, so the new business downtown, Coffee and Pie, will probably be one of my caterers there. All food coming in will be catered in. No cooking at the facility at all. Let me try, as far as the sign on the wall, there will be no sign on the wall. And I asked the Planning Commission if I could have a two-sided billboard. This is a picture of my two-sided billboard. So that's the only signage I would have if it's allowed by the Planning Commission. Them two poles will be taken out. There are no signs on the wall, so that should hopefully solve that. Alcohol, I will not serve any alcohol whatsoever, and I will not have a refrigerator with alcohol in it. There will not be bring your own bottle neither. The only primary reason would be for a catered event, just like if you would go out to a wedding or any community event where alcohol was served as a cash bar. That would be the only thing. Parking, as far as parking, I did talk to St. Luke's Church, and like John said, number one, they're in full favor of having a homeless shelter there, but I'm not going to operate one. And they're in full favor of allowing the continuation of the written agreement and gentleman's agreement to allow parking in their lot. As far as the employees or volunteers that I would have in, I'm thinking that, I talked to LifeWorks, and they're people will come over and do light housekeeping. As far as anyone else in that facility, it might be one other individual in there who might sit at the desk as a receptionist. And maybe some curators will come in to ensure. I work with the Dakota County Historical Society on a lot of the ventures, and I fully support the Leduc Mansion. I'm a volunteer out there, and I was out there during the Civil War days. Did I miss any other concerns, John?
I don't know. There may be other concerns that, other.
Okay, I was the director of Beyond the Yellow Ribbon. I retired, okay? And the big celebration was held at the American Legion last week where they recognized me. We are not competing, right? I think we're complimenting their services because I follow all the rules and the procedures of Beyond the Yellow Ribbon because I believe in them. They are a good organization, and that's what is needed in the state of Minnesota to bring all the soldiers all the way home, before deployment, during deployment, and when they transition home. We need to bring them all the way home, and that is all the way until the VFW fires their guns. That from birth to death. That's where we need to serve all our soldiers.
Okay.
My writing isn't good, and there were a lot of things brought up. I think, please, if I didn't address your concern, please bring it up so I can reply to you. Yes, I'm truly passionate about my mission here in Hastings because I served in the Army for 20 years. I was the first sergeant. And as I carry forth that obligation as the first sergeant because I signed a blank check when I entered the service. And that blank check is still ready for cashing. One of the key things as a duty and obligations as the first sergeant, no one will be left behind. That means if I'm leading the formation, I will fall out and go behind and see if anybody fell out. That's my obligation. The majority of my business is conducted not in the home. We go to them to serve them. As I said before, if you didn't catch me, me and my wife, my daughters, and Paul, we have invested over $18,000 in economic impact in cleaning up the community. Thanks for reminding me that. The Hastings Ministerial Association, Blessed Hastings, has stepped up this week to, if there are any yards, the city can call them, or I can call them, or the county service officer will call them, and they will get the yard cleaned up. That is happening. That happened just this weekend. So that relieves me of one of the jobs I have to do, so I can concentrate more on the human element. Yes, I agree. We have a lot of veterans that have PTSD problems, drinking problems, gambling problems, but that's no more than a reflection of the general society, you know, and somebody's got to be out there to help them and get them to the proper source of treatment. That's one of my jobs. And the primary person I go through is the Dakota County Veteran Service Officer because they are the clearinghouse for all of them. I came, go ahead,
Oh, Amy, could you please go to the podium with any questions? I know, but that would be recorded at home. If you, sure, if you'd like.
I have a different concern, actually. I just wanted, yes, if there were questions, and so my question is, am I understanding correctly that you are affirming that you would intend to offer alcohol at up to 150 events a year? Catered events? Okay, can you clarify how many events there would be alcohol served at? And are these the events where there'd be 150 people or 140 people?
Right now, I don't know how many events I would have. I could refer that to Paul. How many does the American Legion have? You know, the VFW closed their doors primarily because, you know, the cost of running a business, because they needed a new roof. Everything was total shame. Just like I initially considered Country Nights, and I learned my lesson very clear there. It would have taken $80,000 to bring that up, and I don't even think I'd have the same questions asked. So that's a clarification of the event. Now, your question of where am I getting my money? I have some very good financial advisors that have done a very good job for me. Therefore, that's where I'm going. I have money that they earned for me to put up the initial investment. And Hastings has been called a very generous community. And I believe in the community of Hastings will put their support in, just like they do United Way of Hastings, Hastings Family Services, and so many other needed projects.
Thank you, Mr. Merkinson.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question, Mr. Merkelson?
We haven't, you want to wait till we,
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
let's finish with the public
Very good.
hearing there. Does anybody else have any other comments? You want to come up to the podium, then?
My question is, I'm still confused, why the necessity to have the event portion of this plan? Because probably there might be other things that I could probably nitpick on, but at the end of the day, this is the main one for me. So unless I missed something, we're talking about approval to have up to 140 events a year, which I still dispute the funeral. There were that many funerals a year there. And that even he's not going to provide alcohol. The catering services that are going to service those events would provide alcohol. That's never existed in the 12 years I've lived there. So I guess the question back to Mr. Markison is the necessity for being able to rent out the facility as an event center when there's so many vacant event centers that are currently for sale. Why not a private residence? And actually, you know, geez, that Coliseum probably hold 150 cars in the parking lot, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. Something's not connecting here for me.
Okay, thank you. In reference to his question, it's no difference than if you as a citizen wanted to have a gathering for your family in a facility or any type of gathering. It's no different than what you do today. As far as the number of events, there are not going to be that many events in that facility because the community of Hastings, we collaborate with them and we work with the community businesses and we have the events at their locations. I'll give you an example of some of the events we got upcoming. On 12 September, we're going out to the YMCA. The YMCA will explain what their products, services that they give. And in addition to that, we're going to celebrate 9/11 out there because we all know what happened on 9/11. And in October, we're going to celebrate Boss's Day because I know everyone here has a boss they need to honor and celebrate. And in conjunction with that, I just submitted a proposed a proclamation to the city to designate Hastings as a Purple Heart City. Now, the city council will have to approve that also, but that is some of the actions we do. And in January, there are 2 holidays in that month. That's where we honor all the women veterans that have served and all the Vietnam veterans that the public, it's a holiday. So we're going to recognize them. And there's another event in March that I'm working on. I have to look at my calendar. We're going to celebrate it. All my celebrations and activities are centered around holidays because there has to be a purpose to have an event, just not have a party. We have a purpose to do these celebrations, and they're backed by the President of the United States and the Governor of Minnesota to do it. You know, this probably doesn't pertain to this, but I was very honored Sunday to hear our mayor give the Gettysburg Address because she taught me something. I might get it wrong. We the people, by the people. That was a speech by Abraham Lincoln, and we will try to follow what he said in those days.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Did you say how many people you plan on having living there?
None,
So,
just my family.
so after 6 o'clock in the evening, you don't need to be open because there's no activities there other than you and your wife living there.
Only if I have an event there.
Oh, so
Or
you,
somebody wants to rent the facility for your family reunion.
I don't believe you a bit.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, if none, I will close the public hearing, and we will now open it up to the commissioners. Commissioners, obviously, this is a very difficult situation here.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner?
I did have a question for Mr. Markinson. This Foss and Swanson veterans, where did you operate prior to now? And how long did you operate?
Number one, Foss and Swanson's has been in operation since 1970 when I entered the service. Because I was a personnel administrator and I cared for all of the troops and their families. I've been in business since 1970. Now, the question is, how long do I plan to stay in service? Well, my answer is when the VFW gathers together and shoots their volley and puts me in the grave and the flag is folded. And then I would hope that if I'd have to ask my wife first if she would do that. I would deed the operation over the city for Hastings for $1.
So as far as this nonprofit being formed,
A nonprofit is already approved. I will give you the letter.
I understand. And so the nonprofit was started when?
The nonprofit was just recently started by Jody, the officer of Mid-Country Bank. I went to her and she put it in the computer, and within 15 minutes, the IRS approved me.
Right. And so I guess what I'm asking is, so you've not had a facility like the one you're proposing here prior to now?
I had a very wise gentleman, a prominent businessman here tell me, you know what, Dean? You don't need a building. You can do your business just like you're doing today. I don't need a building, but I feel this building will be a benefit to the city of Hastings and its residents, not for me, for them.
Okay. So you're in the process of then, like you said, developing your bylaws and doing all those formal
The
stuff?
bylaws only have about 4 pages left to be typed, and they will be taken, well, I was going to hand carry them up, but I looked at the charges, and if you hand carry them, it costs you about $30 more than electronically doing. To establish myself as a nonprofit, I have invested over $1,000 just to do that. And when I get done, if anybody wants to be a nonprofit, all they have to do is take the template I did and change the name.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got another question for you, Mr. Mert. I think okay, so the events that you potentially will be having in this property, the profit from those events will be in with the nonprofit itself, correct? So the events will help the nonprofit financially.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Or else I'm going to have to go in for bankruptcy.
Sure, sure. I just think maybe that was a question.
Basically, the goals of a nonprofit is at the end of the year, their bank balance should be zero. That's the goal. And if you are not at zero bank balance, you are not a nonprofit. You made a profit.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I've got a couple questions for John. You know, this to me seems very similar, the property itself seems very similar to me for the couple of repurposed schools that we have. And the Wise Funeral Building, along with like the Wise Building with the parking spaces, I guess. I don't really know what happened to Wise, because I think I've heard a couple different things, and then what I see going on at that property doesn't seem to be like what I've heard. So I'm a little trying to put together the ability to repurpose these commercial buildings in residential areas. So I really didn't ask a question, did I? So currently, when, like in the capacities that these schools and the Wise building are being repurposed, are they similar to this in that the parking isn't adequate? We're right in the middle of a residential area. all of that is very similar to this building.
Yeah, Commissioner, we have a few properties that are in residential districts that have historically not been residential operations. The funeral homes, this one, and the Wise Funeral Home being a couple of examples of those. And with this property in particular, its operation predated the establishment of zoning regulations, and so they were grandfathered in their operation, and so that's how it came to be. But you're correct in that they're challenging properties. You know, they are larger properties, typically larger than what a single family or two-family use of that property would be profitable for. And so that's a conundrum that we have with some of these properties. There are some operations that could occur within, there's some sorts of institutional church uses, other things that are allowed within residential districts. With this one in particular, the one thing that's unique about it is that Mr. Marcuson would be purchasing and living in the property, and so that's where the home occupation aspect of it comes in. So that's a little bit unique in this situation.
So what is Wise currently being utilized as?
I don't know if it's utilized as anything right now. They have moved the operation, consolidated both funeral homes into the Starkson Family Life Center. I believe that property is for sale right now, and I'm not sure what might end up there. But it's zoned similar to this one and would be under the same restrictions.
Okay, so it's not being occupied.
I don't know what it's being occupied for right now. I don't believe funeral operations are occurring there any longer. I'm not sure if somebody lives there anymore.
I know in December I went to a funeral there.
Okay, I'm not sure.
So if they're doing any business there, the city would know. It must be residential
I would
or
hope.
nothing.
I would hope.
And then the repurposed schools, like Tilden, those what's the zoning of that?
Those are zoned similarly, with Tilden being a senior center type of use that would be allowable within the zoning district. That's one of the few non-residential things that is allowed within there. And then the daycare center at Cooper School would be similar.
So help me understand the zoning compared to the use. Is it a special use permit?
I don't recall if it's a special use permit or not, but it's a defined use that's allowed either as a permitted use or a special use within the zoning district.
Does Tilden do community event, like a community center? That'd be considered a community center just like this, right?
A lot of things are similar to it,
And that's in a residential area, and it's zoned
similarly.
similarly. So it's probably a special use permit at Tilden and Cooper, behind Quick Trip.
Yeah, and with the Cooper, it's different. That's owned by a private entity. That's being run as a daycare center. And so that's a permitted use within the district. With the senior center, because it's being run by the school district and schools are a permitted use, it's a little bit of a gray area, frankly, on that one, but it's been something that's been allowed to occur within there.
So for instance, the use that Tilden is using the facility, this building would be the same type of process to get daycare in there. It would be sounds like a special use permit.
Yeah, special use, daycare facilities would be defined, I believe, as a special use permit in this zone, correct?
I just want to make one comment. What seems to be, I feel, confusing myself along with potentially other people here, is the talk about what it was used for and 150 people for 140 events. I mean, that's what was seen in the past. that's not necessarily, I mean, that's not necessarily what's being proposed here. It's certainly, I mean, there could be a lot more, there could be a lot less. I mean, you were just talking a lot about what its previous use was and the conditions surrounding that use. Just to me, made it a little bit confusing about what was being requested versus what the past use was. So I got a little convoluted and confused about the intermixing of that when the previous use is not there anymore. But just a comment. That's all.
I think that was more of a comparison for the use there to the neighbors, what it was and what it could be.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Martin.
I'm going to keep it short because it's after 8:30 here. Just want to start out by saying thank you for your service and everyone else out there that has served. That has not yet been said tonight, so I'll say it on behalf of the commission. You quoted Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address, "We the people, by the people." Not a person here tonight has spoken in favor of this, and I think that, to me, sends a fairly clear message. I don't think, I'll go out on a limb here and say that anyone in this room doesn't agree with your mission, your purpose, and your desires. I, for one, 100% agree with it, and I think it's a great idea. I just don't think the location that you're choosing is the greatest. So I guess my parting words for you would be to take that passion and just focus it in a different location. One place brought up was the Coliseum. There's multiple businesses. The strip mall out by Coburn's was also mentioned. And to your point, Commissioner, with the schools, this is a home occupation permit. Those people are not living there. So I think we're slightly comparing apples to oranges there in that respect. So I am in favor of your mission and your purpose. I am not in favor of it at that particular location. So that's all I've got.
Commissioners? Commissioner Johnson?
Sure. This might be a question for John. And so to clarify, this is not a special use permit?
Correct. This is a home occupation permit, not a special use permit, correct?
And the home occupation is acceptable in the R2 zone?
It is. Home occupation permits are permitted uses within the R2 district. There's a listing of regulations that they have to follow. And then with these type 2 permits, the commission and council may have additional regulations placed on them as well.
So our responsibility is to verify that this complies with code?
Verifies it complies with code and assess the fit within the neighborhood itself. The whole, the whole rationale behind a home occupation permit is that it's something that can operate in harmony with the neighborhood. And you know, some occupations are virtually invisible. You're sitting at your office at home working on a computer. Nobody knows, nobody cares. Not a permit needed. When you have a situation in which outside people are coming in or outside activity beyond what you would have for a typical home occurs, that's when the home occupation permit comes before the commission. And that's where the assessment comes as to whether what's being proposed is something that would be consistent with what one would expect within a residential neighborhood.
Thank you.
I have a question. So so the way this is being presented to us is the home occupation. Because it's in a residential area, is why it's coming to us that way versus a special use permit?
Two reasons, well, a couple of different reasons of that. One, in order for anything to come forward as a special use permit, there needs, that use needs to be defined within the city code. This use is not defined within the residential district, couldn't come before you as a special use permit. When we're taking a look at a home occupation permit, two things are required. One, the person involved in that, chiefly involved in that, has to live on the property. That has to be their main residence. And then two, then the operation needs to occur while in conjunction with their living on the property.
I have a couple comments. First, I'd like to say I admire your mission and your goals, Mr. Markinson. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. What I do have a little bit of an issue with is the conference centers, which may, in all likely, have nothing to do with that. And I think that's what most people have an issue with. It is certainly, in some ways, similar to what was there, but in a lot of ways, very dissimilar. The hours of service, most of your funerals were during the day. I think much of this would be later in the evenings. So it's going to impact people when they get home from work, and the parking, which is already a struggle. The number of events, the types of events. I guess I just have some issues with that. These people moved into this area with the funeral home there. They understood what they were getting into. Now that's gone. They're concerned, and rightfully so, as what this impact of these gatherings would be, and what it might do to the neighborhood. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions, comments?
Guess I'd make a motion if we're there. I guess move to deny this type 2 home occupation permit in this particular location.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to deny the occupation permit. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further comments? If not, all those in favor of a deny, so an aye would be a deny. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The motion to deny carries.
Okay. And as a reminder, commissioners and the public, what'll happen here is the Planning Commission has made a recommendation for denial on this, which will go forward to the City Council for consideration at the September 16th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody who came in for this. The next item on our agenda is other actions, other business.
Other business, well, hasn't been too much as far as business goes. The City Council did approve the ordinance amendment for climate control storage at the last meeting. I've been in contact with the people that may be proposing something down there. There may be a permit coming in short time on that property. Other things that might be coming up, I still haven't heard any confirmation the last couple of weeks on the Caribou Weinstein project over on Vermillion Street. A couple of weeks ago, I heard that they were very close to submitting plans, so that might be something coming forward to us in the near future as well. So our next meeting would be scheduled for September 23rd.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions, comments? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
We have a motion. How about a second?
I'll second.
Yep. All those in favor say aye. We are adjourned.